What's up, boxing fans? This is TBE Boxing back at you again. Today's topic: Errol Spence turning into the laughing stock of boxing by clout chasing Canelo Alvarez and ducking Terrence Crawford. Let's chop it up and see what it's all about.
Got the money for minutes, pretty bitch, gotta show me titties. This is the life that I chose, huh? On the block with the pole, huh? This is the life that I chose, huh? On the block with the pole, huh? That life before riches, huh? That life before riches, huh? Pretty bitch, show me titties, huh? And I got the glazy run up on me, I'ma make you get it. I'ma make you get it.
Now, I follow you on social media, like a lot of people do, and there was a graphic that was thrown up recently of all the top welterweights, and you commented like, look, what are we doing here? I beat several of the guys on this graphic. Can we be done with everybody else but Terrence Crawford? Can we just do Errol Spence versus Terrence Crawford?
I mean, that could happen. We got to see how it go. But, you know, like I said, I can move up to 160 and fight Canelo Alvarez.
Okay, boxing fans, you heard it straight from the horse's mouth. The announcer asked Errol Spence, can we be done with all, the other people that talk about fighting these other guys? Can we be done? Can we just talk about Terrence Crawford? And what did Errol Spence say? Oh, it may happen. It could happen. But I could move to 160 and fight Canelo Alvarez. Now, I did a video about that already, okay? As a matter of fact, here's the graphic for that video. Take a look at it. Errol Spence willing to fight Canelo in a desperate attempt at ducking Crawford. So you can go and check that video on my channel, but let's continue. So again, anytime that Errol Spence is asked about Terrence Crawford, is always some excuse or some, he never answered the question about Terrence Crawford. He's always making something up or diverting the question or, slipping and diving and shucking and jiving, so here it is. Doesn't want to talk about fighting Terrence Crawford. Now, you can go and look at that video, the full video. They go into it a little bit more. And, he's talking about fighting Terrence Crawford. If he fights Terrence Crawford, it's going to be 60-40. Now he's mentioning 70-30 or whatever they want to give Crawford. That's what he basically said. So, it's at this point, it's somewhat embarrassing. Basically, as far as I can see, Errol Spence is turning himself into a laughing stock. Okay, anytime Terrence Crawford's name is mentioned, he starts shaking, and it's very apparent right now. Talking about fighting Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez hasn't shown any interest in fighting Errol Spence at 160 pounds. Okay, we just saw Canelo fight at 168 against Callum Smith. Okay, great fight, by the way, except the fact that Callum Smith didn't show much. But anyway, Errol Spence basically has continued, with his ducking conspiracy, refusing, to entertain fighting Terrence Crawford under any circumstances, putting all kind of obstacles in the way. First it was 60-40, now it's 70-30, which, the 60-40 scenario was basically just another way to duck the fight, okay? Just putting up roadblocks to the fight, basically. It wasn't 60-40 against Porter. It wasn't 60-40 against Mikey Garcia. It wasn't 60-40 against Danny Garcia. So why is it 60-40 against Crawford? And whatever it was against Danny Garcia, Mikey Garcia, Porter, or even Book, nobody heard about what the actual numbers were. It was never made public. Okay, so even if it was 60-40 or whatever, it didn't make that public to basically embarrass the fighters or to put an obstacle in the way of the fight. So, but here it is, they're talking about publicly 60-40, 70-30, and even worse, whatever they decide to give Crawford. I mean, this is a ridiculous. I mean, I don't, I mean, people. I don't know what else to say. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, it's a crying shame, basically. I mean, Errol Spence is making himself into an embarrassment in the boxing community. With his blatant, shameless ducking of Terrence Crawford. I mean, this thing is ridiculous at this point. And so we see that Terrence Crawford is basically saying that, hey, he put out a little thing on Instagram saying, and they said it was me. This chapter is closed. And I really don't blame him, because at the end of the day, why even bother talking about fighting Errol Spence? I mean, he might as well just move on and get other fights and forget about Errol Spence, because it's clear to anybody that can see here, that Errol Spence doesn't want to fight Crawford. He's definitely afraid of this fight. Okay, and he's putting anything and everything in the way of actually making the fight. So I mean, it is what it is, people. I mean, I would love to see the fight myself, but at this point, I'm gonna have to agree with Terrence Crawford and just say that this fight is never gonna happen, because Terrence, I mean, Errol Spence doesn't want to fight, and the only way we're gonna get this fight, like I've said before, is for us to drag Errol Spence into the ring with Terrence Crawford. That's the only way the fight is going to happen. We're going to have to, when I say we, I'm talking about the commentators, the fans, the boxing community. We're going to have to drag Errol Spence into that ring against Crawford, or this fight will never happen. Okay? And this is, so it is what it is. We can't sugarcoat this thing anymore. I mean, a lot of people still trying to make excuses, especially LDBC fanboys out there, talking about, oh, Errol Spence is making moves. He's playing chess. Right? Anytime he talks about ducking Crawford, they say, oh, Errol Spence is playing chess. I mean, that's why these fanboys out there saying, yeah, he's making business moves. Yeah, it's business. But these same clowns are out there talking about Canelo is ducking Charlo. Okay, because Canelo is making other fights, fighting people like Callum Smith and other people like that. Like he just collected another belt, and put it on his mantle. These same guys that say, oh, he should fight Charlo. He's ducking Charlo. But when Errol Spence is ducking Crawford, he's making business moves. So why isn't it business move when Canelo is not fighting Charlo? Why isn't that business move? Why isn't it that Canelo is making smart business moves? Why isn't Canelo playing chess? Okay? Yeah, so you see the double standard. These guys are jokers. Okay? At the end of the day, as far as I can see, Canelo is ducking Charlo. Errol Spence is ducking Crawford. And it is what it is. I'm not going to sit here and, be a fanboy of one fighter or another fighter. I'm just going to tell it like it is. If Canelo is ducking, I'm going to say he's ducking. If Spence is ducking, I'm going to say he's ducking. I don't care if Crawford is ducking, I'm going to say he's ducking. Okay? I'm not going to sugarcoat it, because these guys, I'm trying to get an interview with these guys, or they might be throwing me a couple of dollars on the side, some chump change, or, because I'm trying to please their fans, or to stay in their good graces, or whatever it might be, what these guys are doing. Most of these guys out there probably getting a few dollars on the side from the team, whatever, maybe Spence team, or whoever team that they're representing. Okay, when you know that they're not getting any money from the team, you will see them saying things like, oh, Canelo is ducking Charlo because they're not getting any money from Canelo. They might be getting a little dollars from Charlo's or the Charlo's camp or whatever. I mean, I'm just speculating, but I mean, that's how they roll. Basically what they do, whoever they support or whoever they're getting a few dollars from, that's who they support, and that's who they come out and run the narrative for. I'm not running a narrative for anyone. I'm going to tell it like it is. And who don't like it, and that's just the way it's going to stay. Okay? So at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, Canelo is ducking Charlo. Spence is ducking Crawford, and it's very plain. And he's been ducking Crawford for 3 years now. And at this point, you know, he's not even trying to hide it. It's just shameless ducking. Okay, he's just doing it shamelessly. Okay, I mean, it's embarrassing. But again, folks, you know, it is what it is. At the end of the day, it looks like the fight's not going to happen, like I said, because I mean, you hear what Crawford had to say about it. You know that he's going to close this chapter because, I mean, how much can you chase a guy for a fight? You know, here it is. Errol Spence is showing up a Canelo fight. Not even there's no fight coming up for Canelo and Spence. Nobody's demanding the Canelo Spence fight. Okay, nobody's asking for that fight. The only people talking about that fight is Spence and his team and his fanboys. There's nobody out there really saying, "Oh, that's the fight that we want to see next." Not even Spence fans want to see the fight next because they know what's going to happen. You know, if Spence go up there against Canelo, it's a slaughter. Okay, so nobody wants that fight. Nobody's asking for that fight. But here it is. Here it is. Spence is showing up at Canelo's fight, and if you know, him and Canelo is going to fight next, or somebody's asking for that fight. You know, it's just basically clout chasing. Nobody's asking for that fight. But then the same Spence is out there talking about he doesn't know why Crawford is showing up at his fights. What do you mean you don't know why? Crawford is showing, and he wouldn't show up at any of Crawford's fight. Crawford is showing up at your fight because people are demanding that fight. You don't know why? I mean, people, I mean, it's ridiculous by now, okay? And, you know, like I said, Spence is basically making himself into a laughing stock. You know, he's losing a lot of points, you know, with his, you know, his shameless ducking of Crawford at this point. And I think a lot of his people are waking up to the fact, okay? And, you know, it's sooner or later, okay, the tables are going to turn and, you know, he's going to feel the pressure because people are really waking up and realizing that this guy is just, you know, just basically a ducking, okay? And there's no other way to put it. There's no nice way to put it. He's a ducker. I mean, he turned into a bigger ducker than Keith Thurman at this point. You know what I mean? So I mean, it is what it is. So maybe we'll see you know, Crawford fight some other guys out there in the welterweight if they're not scared to fight him. I mean, the only person I hear talking about fighting Crawford right now, and you know, people, you know, a lot of the Spence fanboys and some other people out there have been asking for that fight as well. They want to see, you know, Crawford fight Porter. I mean, and that fight could happen because Porter is the mandatory, okay, for Crawford. But you know, the fact of the matter is, I mean, yeah, he's the mandatory, but Porter hasn't activated the mandatory. I mean, it's up to Porter to activate it. It's not up to Crawford to activate it. You know what I mean? Porter is the mandatory, and if he really wants to fight, all he has to do is activate the mandatory, and the fight is going to happen because Crawford is not going to duck his mandatory. He's going to get stripped. Okay, so he's not going to duck a fight with Porter. You know, as a matter of fact, Crawford already came out and said he dares Porter to activate the mandatory, and if Porter activate the mandatory, he's going to stop Porter. Okay, so I mean, how you can't get any clearer than that. So the ball is in Porter's court. So Porter, if he really wants to fight against Crawford, all he has to do is activate the mandatory, and that's it. Okay, and the fight will be on, but we don't see that happening. So all this talk about Porter fighting Crawford is just talk. Okay, if Porter don't activate the mandatory, the fight is not going to happen. So Porter needs to step up to the plate and activate the mandatory, you know, and stop procrastinating and talking about it. He want to fight Porter. He's been talking about it. I mean, talking about he want to fight Crawford. He's been talking about that for like 6 months now, but he hasn't stepped up. He hasn't stepped up to the plate and activated the mandatory. Okay, I mean, it's just a push of a button. That's all it takes. So what's the holdup? Okay, so you know, talk is cheap at the end of the day. So I mean, I don't really think that Porter, you know, I doubt if he's going to fight Crawford. Okay, because he has a chance to get the rematch against Spence. Okay, Porter has a chance to rematch it because he's a mandatory for Spence as well. You know, he has worked his way up to become the mandatory for Spence. You know, so I'm more than likely that fight might happen. Okay, because you know, I think that Crawford, I mean, Porter sees that Spence is looking a little weak, not as, 100% like he was prior to the accident. And I think Porter believed that, this version of Spence, he can probably beat, have an easier time fighting than the last version of Spence before the accident. So I think that he's, basically backtracking and, and wanting to fight. I think he's going to want to fight Spence instead of Crawford, because Crawford is a much tougher fight than against Spence, because as we heard from even Porter himself, he believed that Crawford can beat Spence. I mean, and he fought Spence, so he should know. So it looks like Porter's gonna is not gonna take the fight against Crawford. He's probably gonna fight Spence. And now, from what I know, people talk about money this and money that, and we hear Thurman talk about he won $10 million to fight Crawford. People. I mean, you actually have those fanboys out there talking about Crawford should fight Thurman. I mean, fight Thurman for what? Thurman has no belt. He's basically irrelevant right now in boxing. Okay, he hasn't fought anybody in almost 2 years. Sitting on the sidelines after he got whooped by Manny Pacquiao. So he's just sitting there, basically, just withering away. Okay, I mean, he's not doing anything in boxing. So I mean, now I can understand if Thurman had worked his way up to become a mandatory for Crawford, like Porter did, okay, or like Kavlakis did, or like anybody that's out there working, and trying to get themselves in a position to where they can become mandatory. He hasn't done any of that. He's not mandatory in any of the. He's not a mandatory in any of the division, whether it's WBC, WBA, WBO, or IBF. I mean, he just sitting on the sidelines doing nothing, and then he want to talk about he want $10 million to fight Crawford. Are you serious? This guy just needs to shut up and just sit on the sideline, get a job as an announcer, because the only thing he can really do is talk. Okay, the only thing he can really do is talk. He's a good talker. When it comes to boxing, he's basically retired or semi-retired. He hasn't been boxing for a while now, and but if he really wants to fight, he needs to go out there and earn his stripes. Okay, he got to go out there and earn it if you want to fight Crawford, because he hasn't done nothing to earn. As a matter of fact, when Crawford came to welterweight and challenged him, and called him out when he had the 2 titles, when he had the double, I think at the time he had the WBC and the WBA belt. He said that Crawford was barely a champion and he wasn't really interested in fighting Crawford. Just like he was ducking Crawford and he was ducking Spence as well. Okay, but now that he has no belts, he's on the sideline and is basically irrelevant in the boxing game. He wants $10 million. Then he talk about, we could have negotiated something. Negotiate what? I mean, at the end of the day, Thurman and Porter and Spence fought, okay, in that fight that they had. I think Porter only got $2 million for that fight against Spence. $2 million. Okay, I think they both got $2 million. Okay, so I mean, you actually have people out there talking about Thurman deserved $10 million, or he could, or at least $8 million. $8 million to do what? What has Thurman done to deserve $8 million in a fight against Crawford? He's not even a mandatory for anybody in any of the champions. Okay, who knows where he is in the rankings? The man is sitting on the sidelines, playing the flute, doing whatever he's doing. So I mean, it's a joke. Spence is, like I said, Thurman is irrelevant right now in boxing. Okay. If he wants to fight Crawford, if he, because of his name, if he wants to cachet his name, then maybe they can give him $2 or $3 million. I wouldn't even give him that much, $3 million. Okay, maybe a million, $1.5 or something like that, and then go ahead and fight down and take that fight. I mean, you want a title again? It's a chance to win the title. So go ahead and take the fight. if you're really serious, okay? Why not take the fight and to get the title, to get Crawford's title? Now, but he want to cash out for $10 million because he already know what's going to happen. He's not going to win the title against Crawford. He's going to lose. So, you know, I mean, it is what it is, man. People got to get serious about this boxing game right now. And right now, it looks to me like, you know, everybody is trying to push these guys, these PBC guys up there as if they're some great fighters. And then, you know, people like, I mean, these guys are basically retreads, okay? I mean, Danny Garcia, Keith Thurman, these guys are basically, I mean, not so much Danny Garcia, but Keith Thurman's a has-been, okay? I mean, I wouldn't pay $10 million to fight Keith Thurman. For what? Okay, so basically, you know, I think Keith Thurman just needs to sit on the sideline like he's been and just keep his mouth shut, okay? I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing the fight against Porter and Crawford. That would be a good fight, I would think. Okay, and Porter has earned his way up there to get that fight. So, but again, the ball is in Porter's court. He got to activate the mandatory for the fight to happen. So activate it, Porter, and you know, stop talking about fighting Crawford and fight him. Okay, I mean, you know, it is what it is. I mean, you know, so you know, in that same interview that we just saw with Spence, you know, he was talking about, oh, when he came back, he fought this champion Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia is not a champion. You know, people talk about Danny Garcia's resume. What resume is that? His resume is losing to Spence and losing to Porter. That's his resume. I mean, how is he a champion? I mean, and if his resume is as good as Derek James was claiming, oh, you know, Danny Garcia got the better resume than Crawford. I mean, these guys are delirious. These guys are, you know, I don't know what, they're delusional. I mean, if Danny Garcia's resume is so great, why isn't he a champion? That's what, answer that question. If Danny Garcia is such a great fighter and such a great and a quote unquote champion is you know, Errol Spence is giving him a championship belt. I guess it's the Errol Spence championship belt because he's calling Danny a champion. Danny's not a champion. He lost the championship and he lost in both fights that he had at the elite level to Spence and to well, 3 times now, Spence, Porter, and Thurman. So I mean, if he was that great, why isn't he a champion? You see, if his resume is so good, if, according to Derek James, why isn't Danny Garcia a champion? I mean, you know, people got to really see this thing for what it is. Okay, they're doing anything to try and belittle Crawford because Errol Spence is terrified of fighting Crawford, and that's what it is. Okay, I mean, he's so terrified, okay, that he wants to clout chase Canelo, okay, in an attempt to duck fighting Crawford. I mean, this thing is ridiculous at this point, man. So, I mean, you know, again, like I said, the only way we're going to get Spence in the ring with Crawford at this point, we have to drag him in there. And, you know, again, I don't really blame Crawford for getting fed up with all this Spence ducking. You know what I mean? You know, he's been chasing Spence now for 3 years. Spence has been ducking him the whole way, kicking, screaming, and scratching, trying to get away from fighting him. And, you know, just making excuse after excuse after excuse. You know, now it's the 60-40 conspiracy, you know, to duck Crawford. Now then he's talking about 70-30. Then after that, he's talking about whatever you want to give them. So, I mean, we can see plainly that he doesn't want to fight Crawford. Now, I don't blame Crawford for saying to himself, hey, the hell with Spence. You know, he doesn't really want to fight. Okay, I'll just move on and, you know, keep doing what I'm doing. Because at the end of the day, you know, Terrence Crawford has achieved much more than Errol Spence has achieved as a boxer in the boxing game, and that's why he's the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and Spence is not. So I think we're gonna leave it there for right now. That's all I have. This is TBE Boxing. I'm out.